Test 1, 2, 3.
Jenny, I don't think it showed you being muted.
It didn't?
I'm seeing it over here on a mute.
Well, that's actually speaker off.
Oh, I'd love to have been there, but I didn't want to get anybody sick. I've been sick for a few days, so. I can't hear you.
Peter, can you hear us?
I can hear you fine now.
But now we have the echo.
So I think the feedback might be on your end. Do you have it running through both your computer speaker and microphones? Or through two different systems that are catching that feedback?
Only through my computer speaker. Doesn't matter if I'm on.
Jenny, why don't you
Testing?
Just restart.
Yeah, it's.
I'll rejoin. How about that? I'll rejoin.
This happened to us at Elevate Englewood. And I think it's when you try to share screen and have it running through here.
I think it might. Let me get my glasses.
I just wonder if she has to be using the.
Well, it's not him, unless he just restarted and it was still happening, so.
I'll give it a try.
I'm not tech savvy. I'm just dangerous enough to read comments.
I push enough buttons to hope it starts to work.
Grandchildren.
All right, Peter, we think it's on our end, so we're trying to figure out what's going on.
Okay, if you want, I can dial in on my phone and just do that, and then maybe you won't get any feedback on your bigger system.
We were getting the feedback with the room being open in here even when you weren't on it, so.
Okay, just turn off my speaker. How's that?
Can't hear you. All right, can you hear us, Peter?
I can.
All right, I think we got it. Awesome. Well, thanks for the patience, everybody, as we got that technical difficulty sorted out. Gotta love hybrid meetings and still dealing with systems this far into learning how to do these hybrid meetings, but it's the challenge we're all still facing, right? So calling to order tonight's meeting, we'll start with the approval of the February 22nd minutes. Is there a motion for that? Oh, roll call, thank you. Roll call, technical difficulty number 2. Roll call, Josh Newell, chair, present.
Suzanne Dirksen is present.
Rita Russell, present. Jennifer Nolan, present.
Brad Power, Community Development Department.
Melissa H. present.
Madeline Hinkfest.
Chris Hargith, Communications Department.
Min Q John, present.
And on the WebEx?
We're good.
Peter Eckel, present.
And re-entering the room as well?
Sean Lewis, city manager.
All right, excellent. We can move on to approval of the February 22nd minutes.
I will move to approve the minutes from February 22nd.
Second. All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And approval of the minutes. All right, jumping back into the strategic plan for Englewood we've got tonight, neighborhoods and economy. So thank you to Brad, to Madeline, to Christopher for being here with us. We're really excited about this. We will go ahead and get it turned over. Feel free to, we're here for any feedback and questions as we go through it. So.
Okay. And this evening, Madeline is going to talk about the neighborhood's outcome area for us. She's our neighborhood resources coordinator. There we go.
Perfect. So the neighborhood's outcome area is one of the outcome areas under the strategic plan. And so the statement for that is we would like Englewood to be a city that fosters diverse, vibrant, connected, and engaged neighborhoods. Under this outcome area, we had 27 total projects, 21 are in progress, 3 are delayed, and 3 have been completed. That first completed project is under Public Works. The second, we did purchase a traveling neighborhood block party trailer, and then last year we had 16 reservations throughout the summer. And then we also did launch a campaign and had residents give feedback about their neighborhood names and neighborhood boundaries. So small. Okay, so the first goal under the outcome area was to ensure neighborhoods are connected to one another. So I worked with a lot of neighborhoods to organize events like block parties, fall fest, happy hours, and things like that. We built neighborhood web pages on Englewood Engaged for residents to be able to refer to their neighborhood, and it was just easier to do that online. We created a neighborhood grant program that focused on beautification. It's called the Neighborhood Improvement Grant that launched a few weeks ago, and neighborhoods are welcome to apply for up to $3,000 to beautify their neighborhood. And we also promote neighbor-to-neighbor programs like Snow Buddies, the Get to Know Your Neighbor grant, Welcome to the Neighborhood bags, and more. And then the second goal is to ensure residents feel ownership and connection to law enforcement and code enforcement. So this past year, the communications department did partner with code and law enforcement, and we ran a campaign that featured positive stories about them. And code enforcement officer Dave Lewis did say that that contributed to less negative feedback about officers, which was great. The next goal is to establish a neighborhood resources program and neighborhood resources coordinator. The establishment of neighborhood groups is on hold until council adopts the neighborhood map, hopefully this year. We purchased the neighborhood trailer, and we also increased National Night Out participation. The fifth goal is to organize neighborhoods into distinct areas with unique identities. And so we, as I've mentioned, the neighborhood map project, there is another draft of a neighborhood map, and that is going to go to council this spring. And once that's adopted, we will promote that on all communication channels we have. We will relaunch the registration for neighborhood groups, and we always are continuing to recruit neighborhood group leaders, and we would like to identify group leaders in each neighborhood, established neighborhood. We're always promoting volunteerism in neighborhoods, and we would like to work to ensure residents are informed and engaged with their local governments. On the communications team, we're always pushing out stories on social media and all communication channels we have. And then we're working to reduce neighbor-to-neighbor conflict. The mediation program has been pretty successful. Last year we had 32 submitted requests to the program. And that's it.
All right, so I'm going to take over from here. Our department overview, I'll just let you read our mission statement. I think at the end of the day, for me, I feel like it's our department's job to tell Englewood's story, its past, its present, and its future. Our structure and communications, we're responsible for 4 issues of the magazine, probably our primary communication piece. We do marketing, branding, graphic design. We manage all our social media channels and the city website. We do public and media relations, community outreach, printing, video production, and of course, neighborhood resources. Responsible for neighborhood outreach, community engagement, events, neighborhood events, not special events are now in Parks and Recreation, and neighbor-to-neighbor programs like Madeline spoke of earlier. Funds that we returned to the fund balance, we returned $37,000. However, $32,000 of that was neighborhood signage. And the reason that program was delayed is we're waiting for the adoption of the neighborhood map. we don't know the official names of all of these neighborhoods yet, so. Our biggest challenge is, what I face all the time is this volatile paper market. Like everything else, you're at the grocery store, costs are rising. It's the same with paper. And I have the figure, how much paper's gone up. So just the cost alone to produce the Englewood magazine, it's up 23%. And that's all because of paper. Not only is it difficult to get paper, but just printing projects in general have slowed down. The time to turn a project is taking longer, and that's all due to the paper market right now. So that's my primary challenge. Also, our kind of from year to year, month to month, just the unknown number of service requests that we get in communications. It's hard to prepare for each of those, not knowing, what's going to happen in the community where we need to launch a public engagement campaign. So, we're just not sure what our workload is going to look like month to month, year to year. We just published a strategic communications plan, and one of the things that I think would help alleviate some of these problems for us is our consultant did recommend that we add a communications manager in 2023. This is just kind of gives you an idea of in 2020 to 2021 over a 6-month period, how our service requests have increased. And I actually had our team look at, I don't have a slide for it unfortunately, but just the first 2 months of 2021 versus 2022, you can see we kind of have the same, increase in our service requests. So we've had about a 43% increase in our service requests year to year. And that's been a challenge, but nothing that we can't keep up with, but just something that, I try to keep an eye on.
So when you're looking at those service requests, what's the nature of the task when those come in? Can you expand on kind of what each of those data points are?
It could be anything from, we need a flyer for a program, okay. We need a poster for a program to, a request could also be like a full-blown communications campaign.
Okay.
And within that campaign, you're going to see, even more tasks that aren't reflected.
So
in that request, there's
more or less
multiple requests.
You're running the full agency concept in-house where you've got the designers, the campaigns, everybody to coordinate, and whether it's a flyer that accounts, do you break down the request to understand, 10 more flyer requests versus 10 more full campaign requests is obviously a big difference in terms of the hours it impacts you, I imagine?
We haven't yet, but we're actually launching a new service request system and planner through Asana. I don't know if you're familiar with Asana.
I do know Asana.
Yeah. So what's going to happen, and this is going to launch within the next couple of weeks, where our internal customers can go, they'll fill out a form, and it will automatically populate Asana. And then within Asana, we can assign individual tasks within each service request.
And then you'll have better visibility on the totality of it too.
Exactly. So this doesn't reflect like every single task within our service request, unfortunately. So.
Oh yeah. So, all right, no, thank you, that helps.
Yeah, you bet. So our top 3 capital project, did we have 3? Maybe we did, but ongoing wayfinding and placemaking efforts that falls within communications. We do work closely with Public Works. One thing we have going now is replacing all of the secondary gateway signage within the city. Neighborhood signage, and we spoke about this earlier, we had 35,000 allocated for neighborhood gateway signs. In 2021, we spent 3,000 of that money, and that was just for the design work. Obviously, like I said, we weren't going to do any of the manufacturing and implementation of those signs until we had a better idea of what the neighborhoods would actually be named. So once City Council approves the new neighborhood map, we're going to begin hopefully manufacturing and installing some of those signs throughout the city. And that map does go to council on April 25th for a study session, and then it would have to go back to council, of course, to be approved formally.
If you didn't vote on that, it was a really robust campaign that communications did to really educate people on, here's what we think your name is and where your boundaries are. And then we got lots of input. The Historic Preservation Commission has moved those lines, right? But frankly, it has been a major holdup in the operations of Madeline, because how are we supposed to really start a massive, here's your neighborhood campaign if we don't have the boundaries set? So, and we wanted to make sure we got that right before we launched.
So well worth it. And through this, community engagement campaign, we get so much feedback, really valuable feedback to change some of those benefits. Some of those names, in fact, changed because of that community engagement. Just for fun, we thought we'd show you what some of these signs might look like. We work with a local vendor named Boyd Signs. They're just right across the street here to come up with some of these concepts.
Hey, is that map available on Englewood Engaged, the one that councils can review?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
All right, so help needed, the loaded question, huh? Eventually, we're going to need additional funding for neighborhood signage, not immediately, but if we're going to do, neighborhood signs throughout the city, how many neighborhoods are we proposing? It's,
I think there's 39,
yeah.
39 or 40.
39 plus, so
Mhm.
as you can imagine, 30,000 to manufacture and implement that many neighborhood signs is not going to go a long ways. Additional funding for professional services to continue our campaigns such as Eat, Enjoy, Explore. We were able to launch that campaign with some CARES funding. We did a lot of successful videos. We're going to continue that campaign no matter what, but really to take that to the next level, it could use some additional funding. Again, like I mentioned earlier, funding for printing to offset the rising cost of paper. Additional staff member, if our service requests continue to rise, that would be extraordinarily helpful. And then modest funding year over year to expand the neighborhood resources program.
What do you predict the potential cost of the staff member and other funding that you need outside of the first gateway signs you mentioned?
Yeah, so, excuse me, one of the things that our consultant recommended was we have a communications assistant on our staff right now, elevating that to a communications specialist position. That funding is actually in our budget now to do that. To add a communications manager, I think you're looking at a salary of, and Jenny, you can probably help me with the benefits, but probably a salary of 85 to 90,000. And then
Sorry,
rough benefits, 30,000?
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Is that staff member that you have on your for the communications manager, that would also look over the service requests? Or, 'cause
Right.
you mentioned the service request need and then the consultant's
Right,
recommendation.
and that's what our consultant was recommending, is to have somebody that could kind of run the day-to-day operations. Look at those service requests that come in, make sure that they get assigned to the appropriate staff members, and really allow the department then to, think more strategically, which I think
Yeah.
is, we try to do that, of course, as much as we can, but, freeing up some more time for that would be helpful.
So it'd just be a net addition of one, and that's that communication manager level. Everything else is built into the budget to shift around for that, but not an addition of 2 people, correct?
Just not in addition.
Okay, gotcha.
Right, okay, just
Professional services to continue the campaigns, kind of what does that entail?
a lot of that is video production.
Okay.
If you saw some of the videos that we produced, and I guess really some unknowns is how can we take that campaign to the next level? We were fortunate to have the CARES funding to launch it. And we worked with a consultant on that, but really to see that campaign, maybe Brad can talk about this a little bit when he talks about economic development, but we work closely with his department on that campaign and with the Greater Englewood Chamber of Commerce. And so how do we continue to encourage people to visit the city, to dine here, to shop here? That's really what that campaign is all about.
On the Englewood citizen, knowing that the rising paper costs, obviously that's a massive challenge right now in the supply chains. Is there any digital alternatives, knowing that obviously, I mean, I love getting it and I look forward to reading each month. My mother-in-law was flipping through it as we're trying to convince her to move out here. She's like, your city does all this stuff? Like, so absolutely fantastic, but I'd be just as happy to see it like digitally if there was an app or something like that. And is there any easy alternatives to manage for that where you can mitigate some of the costs for an opt-in type of digital program for newsletters, or is that a big project to even explore on how to implement?
I think the challenge is that the magazine is the only way we reach every single resident in the city.
Yeah.
And if we were to move the magazine to strictly digital, I don't even know what that percentage would be if people were not connecting.
Is there the opportunity for, I agree with you, and I'd never want to pull it away, but is there an opportunity for a hybrid approach? So people could opt in and say, hey, I value the magazine, but I also am going to read it once and don't want to waste the paper. And so there could even be a, environmental reason that people might choose to opt in, but having that choice.
I think postage would be, the biggest challenge, because right now it goes out bulk.
Yeah.
So suddenly if we have to send it to individual addresses, that postage cost goes way up.
So managing even the opt-out.
Yeah, and I would want to pull in Christine Underhill and kind of talk about the impact to the city section is what, we're responsible for. That's just, a fraction of the magazine. We also have the recreation guide that we have to consider.
Yeah. Makes sense, thank you.
That's the one consistent message I've heard year over year, is that the newsletter is the one piece of communication that reaches every single resident.
Yep. And people are proud of it in the city. That's the feedback that I get. People are very proud of that magazine.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
It's a nice magazine.
God has spoken.
And I think for the cost, and I don't have the figure in front of me, but I want to say it's like, $1.50 per issue, something along those lines, to reach every single household. I think is worth that cost.
Oh, absolutely agreed. It's just, is there any way to defer that and balance it? And that's the challenge of having the ability to reach so many people with such quality content too. So, awesome. Any other questions on this?
Thank you for the questions and feedback. I appreciate it.
All right. Good evening again, everybody. Once again, my name is Brad Power. I'm the Director of the Community Development Department. As of yesterday, I've been with the city 6 years. And I'll cover it before I go through the department objectives. I'll go through the economy outcome area. And as you can see, there's a lot of projects. So my game plan for tonight was to highlight one or two per slide. And if you make a note, just interrupt me. We can talk more in depth about any one of them, but that would be helpful maybe to get through the slides a little quicker. So in terms of one of the major objectives that was achieved last year was the formation of the Englewood Downtown Development Authority. And that was an outgrowth of the downtown plan that was started pre-COVID and then finished during the COVID experience. And one of the recommendations was to have a long-term investment and management vehicle in the downtown core area. And the DDA area extends from this area on the train tracks all the way just to the east of the hospitals. It includes the historic downtown core as well. And so that group is up and running now. And so they've actually also had some discussions with City Council about some early funding. And then this last November, and I'll talk a little bit about this in the context of the City Center area and others, that there was an election last year that gave them long-term bonding capacity over the course of the next 30 years that could really make a pretty significant physical difference in the improvement of the entire area over the course of that time. So that's that one. So I'll get into City Center in terms of what's happening this year as well, but obviously that's a major consideration for the longer term future of the community as well. And we've been working with a selected developer from the Pacific Northwest, Portland specifically, over the course of the last couple of years to set the table for the redevelopment of City Center through a new public-private partnership. So City Center was redeveloped 22 years ago through a public-private partnership. And we're essentially going to do that again. But a lot of what was done 20 years ago relative to how this project was positioned resulted in a very complicated real estate scenario and puzzle on this area. So we have to kind of unwind some of what was done there and rewind it in a different way, possibly with council's approval, with new agreements, development agreements and other agreements that will be put in place with that developer going forward, including possible public investment through the city, the DDA, other avenues as well. And so that has been and continues to be a major project for our redevelopment portion of our department. And it is incredibly complex, as I said. We are Also dealing with the remnants of a bankruptcy for part of this area on the front along Hamden, where you see the former Office Depot and Harbor Freight and some of the Ross buildings and those. That's another party that controls that part of the real estate, so we have to work with them. We have to work with them to try to get them to partner with our selected developer, and then we have to take all of that in terms of what we can do to position this property for redevelopment to the City Council for their review and approval, hopefully later this year, through what is known as a master development agreement. So that would memorialize everything that would have to happen in City Center in that agreement, so that the council can make the decisions and the community can be informed in terms of how this project in this area will be redeveloped. So in terms of some of the goal areas, one of the other large projects that we're doing is what's known as Codex, which is a complete rewrite of our land use development code. Our land use code, also known as Title 16, also known as the Unified Development Code, is really the convening factor that manages and regulates all physical improvements in Englewood. So that could be somebody that wants to do a backyard fence, all the way up to the $54 million expansion that Swedish Hospital is doing right now, and everything in between. It hasn't been updated in 19 years. And so we thought it was opportune time with the pace of development and the amount of change that's happening in this community, which is largely unprecedented over the course of the last 5 years, that we need to modernize our codes. And we need to incorporate more sustainability, more green building practices, and also more neighborhood design elements. We're hearing a lot about the pace of change in neighborhoods, parking impacts, those types of things. That's all housed in our development code. So we've embarked on a project that'll take probably about the next year or so. Hopefully by this time next year, the council is considering the code amendments as they come through, but we're working with a consultant to position some of the discussion right now for community input. So we had our first community kickoff input meeting in February. There's a large community workshop that's planned for April 14th. So everyone can come and provide their input in terms of what they see as the priorities. So that's another thing that we're working on. The top one there, attract and retain a hotel, or attract and retain a hotel in Englewood. Our development partner, the company is SKB in Portland, is primed to do a hotel on this site in City Center. They think that there's a market here for a full-service real hotel in Englewood that's transit accessible. And so they've already been reaching out to potential hotel operators and even developers. So that's something that we hopefully will see if the redevelopment goes forward at City Center. Now, let me see, out of this list, our online permitting system, kind of about 2/3 of the way down. We have been doing paper acceptance, people walking into our front desk for transactions relative to development applications and building permits, time immemorial. And the advent of COVID forced us to shift to remote. And that was fortuitous because at the same time we were engaging in a pre-planned effort to invest in a new online permitting and building permitting software system. And that went live in August of last year. So a lot of our business in terms of those two elements of what we do is started to shift online. We still get a fair amount of people who come in and want to speak to one of our professionals who do the design review and the building permitting. So we have a two-system process now, but that has gone well for us to try to offer as much online opportunities for people and payments as well. That used to be a little bit of a sticking point where people would have to come physically pay for the permits. That's now offered online, far more efficient. One of the things that's related in the middle there is in-person customer feedback sessions. That's something that I do annually with 3 different groups of customers: our economic development clients, our planning customers, and our building division customers. And what we do is we convene a breakfast of 8 or 10 folks that are either frequent flyers with us or somebody who's maybe even been in with us once. And I have no agenda. I just sit down with them and I ask how we're doing. And I get that personal feedback. And one of the things I also ask is, a lot of you work in other communities up and down the Front Range, so you see a lot of these types of systems in terms of what communities demand of their applicants. What can we do better in terms of our processes and applications and our timing and that type of thing? So as I said, I do that once per year with each of those groups. We rotate through. And the manager in our department that's responsible for each of those areas joins me for those discussions. So that's one of the ongoing things that we do. One of the other things that we've been doing is talking more to businesses, especially as we recover from COVID. We try to, with finances help, to reach out to businesses that have left the community and try to ask what were the factors in that. And as you can imagine, they're all over the map. Some of them outgrow the community. Some people just retire and decide to do something else. And others just decide to hang it up. We want to understand their story. We want to understand why they made those decisions. Likewise, we also reach out to the new businesses to make sure that they're aware of our economic development programs. We offer robust training programs. We have 2 grant programs that new businesses can take advantage of to either get started, and if a business has been in business in Englewood for a few years, they can take advantage of a grant to expand their business through some type of physical investment in their structure. So we've done that as well. Let's see. Chris mentioned this earlier. The Citizen magazine has been invaluable to us for conveying the story of business in this community. Especially in the last 2 years, we've really highlighted a lot of the businesses that have either adapted to or struggled through or now are emerging from the experience in the last 2 years. And conveying that in the magazine and the other social media channels has been just invaluable. Parenthetically, I just mention that when COVID forced everybody to adjust their lives in the 3rd week of March of 2020, I very quickly decided with our economic development manager to pivot our economic development program to start business support immediately. And so I think we were the first business in Colorado, or first community in Colorado to put checks in people's hands in COVID. We did that prior to the end of March of 2020. And fortuitously, that led to what grew to become 12 programs, 12 different grant programs that were all COVID related. We shifted our entire economic development effort to COVID support for two years. We're still doing it. And so we've been doing that. Unfortunately, the CARES Act kicked in right at the good time for us to having expended almost all of our economic development funds in a couple of months. CARES Act kicked in and we were able to have a pretty robust program where we've done over 530 grants to businesses and an investment of just about $1.5 million. So that was one of the things as well. Training programs, we have 11 partners in our economic development program, and they range from the Federal Small Business Association to MICASA in Denver that does women and minority business development, to our primary partners, which are the Chamber of Commerce and the Small Business Development Center, that offer robust training programs. A lot of that obviously shifted online over the course of the last couple of years, but they're now coming back to shift into either hybrid situations or hopefully and more sustainably more in-person opportunities, because that's where the real exchange of those programs takes place. Okay, thank you for indulging me in this quick summary of that. In terms of the Community Development Department, I would say our mission is to implement the policies and programs that shape the built environment in this community. And we do that through our planning, building, economic development, redevelopment, and housing programs through the department. We have 17 full-time employees. We're all located across the hall in this building. And our budget this year is a little over $3 million. I've touched on a few of these, and there will be a couple new ones here. 2022 is going to be a robust, busy year for our work program. Codex is, as I before mentioned, effort to rewrite our development code from the ground up. And I may say that I forgot to mention that Suzanne is serving as a citizen member of the steering committee on that effort, so we're keeping her busy in that area. One of the related things related to the Codex project is we're embarking on a housing assessment. Obviously, affordability, the ability of people to afford housing is a huge issue in the metro area. And obviously, it's an emerging and growing issue here. So we've partnered with the state. The state actually is giving us a grant to fund that assessment. And that's going to consist of two parts. The first part will be really to take a scan of what is the situation now with housing people in Englewood. What is our demographics in terms of who's living here now, who would like to live here but can't afford it, who is threatened with being priced out, and getting kind of a scope of what that demographic looks like. And then the second part will be, are there any types of policy choices that could be made relative to encouraging additional housing across the board for more types of folks? And so that might be new fees. It might be in parts of town that would accommodate well. It might be if you're doing a multifamily project, you get a density bonus, you can build more units if a certain percentage of them are affordable. Those are the types of things that we'll look at. We'll obviously have the city council review and accept any types of policy outcomes that might relate to that area. And the timing is such that if that study will come together, that we could incorporate that into any of the requisite zoning and development code changes that we want to consider. So that is going to be happening throughout. It's just about to start. It'll be happening throughout the spring and summer, and hopefully wrap up in the fall. In terms of budgets that were budget amounts that was returned, we did return a fair amount from our professional services and contractual. And a lot of that, the lion's share of that was related to the fact that we had an ambitious timeline for starting city center redevelopment. And a couple of things happened that prevented that. One was our development partner with other responsibilities in terms of their company reaction to COVID. They slowed down. They also wanted us to wait and see the outcome of the election for the Downtown Development Authority's longer-term debt authorization last November. Now that that was successful, we're re-picking up that effort. So that money will start to be expended. As you can imagine, there's a fair amount of lawyers involved in situations when you're talking about repositioning major real estate assets. So a lot of that will be for our efforts to get to the point where we have a development agreement that's ready to go forward. So we consumed about 88% of our budget last year. And then I would just say, thanks to the City Council's supplementary budget allocation 2 months ago, we've received an additional $35,000 to complete our economic development strategic plan, which is going to be a 5 to 10 year look into the future of our economic development program, and look at best practices elsewhere and give us some ideas of ways that we can continue what we think is a pretty successful program, but we want to make sure that we are maintaining our edge in terms of our delineation of the program. Challenges faced is balancing some of these large projects that I've mentioned with the fact that the continued pace of development activity, projects keep walking into the door, so our planning staff and our building staff is just busy, but we need their attention to some of these other projects as well, especially the two largest of them is Codex and the housing assessment. And then the prospect, and I apologize, I should say if the housing market cools, if we have a hard stop for externalities, inflation, materials inflation, the international conditions, if the housing market were to cool very rapidly, that may have an impact in terms of revenue, because obviously the revenue situation on the building side with our fees and permits has been pretty robust over the course of the last 3 years. We're in a volatile situation right now in terms of that might lend itself to a little bit more unpredictability than has been the case in the last 5 or 6 years. So that's a potential challenge. And then you may have heard this from other departments, or you may hear of it from other departments, but hiring and retaining qualified staff in a very competitive environment. I just concluded a search for a manager, one of our key managers, and it was a pretty interesting search because people have a lot of options out there, and we've just concluded that successfully and looking forward to it. But in this labor environment, it may be a challenge going forward. And then finally, needed help, future input in terms of new development related fees that may take place in terms of affordable housing or infrastructure fees related to new development, impact fees, that type of thing. That might be on the table as an outcome of our search into our new development code. And that might be something that we would come back to you and ask your input on, if any types of fee changes that would be on the table in the future. And then related to my last point about hiring folks, is just maintaining Englewood, that we can attract and retain high quality staff. Make sure that they're compensated in a way that we remain competitive in the region, I think. I'm speaking on behalf of a lot of our other department heads, probably saying that. It's based on some recent experience. And that concludes my remarks. I appreciate the indulgence of the time, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Brett? Yeah, thank you. On the first bullet there, the future input on how BAC could help, are you looking to have like a consultant to help understand that fees? I mean, I don't know if the BAC would necessarily be able to speak to fees to be implemented and things like that.
Well, I think what we would ask you about is in terms of the overall relative menu of the city. Where would something like that fit in? I'm not sure that we would ask relative to you designing it, but in terms of where it would fit and equate with everything else that, in terms of the revenue aspects of what comes into the city, where would something like that fit? That could be something in terms of input. And yes, we would likely have a specialized consultant help in terms of impact fees, because those are very specifically and specially designed.
Yeah.
By most communities.
Has HR already presented to y'all? Yes?
Yes.
And they went over the compensation and classification study that's about to kick off? Because I think to Brad's point on this question, that's what's going to drive that discussion. It'll be that data that will take to city council and say, do you want to be at 90% of the market? Do you want to be at 95% of the market? So because we just went to 90% of the market, it affected about 50 employees that were below 90% of the midpoint of the market for the region. We know that data that we based that on was over 2 years old. So we know we're already way behind just getting people to 90. So we know that the dollar amount is going to be significant at the end, towards the end of this year when we start creating the budget for next year to bring people up to 90% again, or to maybe go to 95%, or better yet, 100%, whatever that looks like. We know that that's going to be a big number. And I think that's what you're asking for here, right? You're making a specific departmental request, but it's really, what's the BAC's thoughts on where to go to advise council, recommend to council on that question?
Yeah, and I'll give you an example. In our staff, like our building inspection staff, we have 3 full-time building inspectors, and they just went to their training where they're hearing from people from around the state, and they're hearing about all these escalations in salaries and trying to keep people, and they come back and it's kind of like, So it's just something to be mindful of as an organization as we go forward, is how do we maintain our regional competitiveness? And that may not necessarily have to be salary. There's other things that we can maybe offer people that we could get vetted around. That keeps us an employer of destination.
So do you have any current staffing challenges? Like some departments are down 20, 30, 40% in some situations. Are you guys fully staffed?
We're some real wood. I am so very fortunate that we have been very stable over the last several years. We have not had a lot of attrition. We have 17 FTEs, so we're not a huge department. But I just did recruit a planning manager, because our former planning manager decided to relocate to his original home in the Midwest for family reasons. So, but the search took us longer than I expected. It was more challenging than I expected in terms of, we had terrific candidates, but we had folks with some real choice. And we were late on a few people to say, hey, let's come back for a second interview. Well, I just took a job elsewhere, So it was that fast. It was kind of like bang, bang, bang. But no, we have fortunately not had a lot of turnover in our staff because, I think we've just got really challenging, engaging work and people who want to be here and see the promise of the community. And, I've been fortunate that way. I count myself very lucky.
So you think, and that's interesting, because it's like, is there things we can learn from being able to keep the staff together during these difficult times to extrapolate to other areas? And you think there's some just nature of the work correlation that's already happening in there based off of the type of job that people were taking and starting out, and that kind of helps benefit you? Is there anything else specifically that you think helps keep your employees and has given you that success over the years?
I'd like to think I'm a good manager. And a motivator and somebody who engages with them. But beyond that, I really do think a lot of people that work in my role, when you talk about city planners and people who work in redevelopment and economic development, it's not just a job to a lot of them. It's frankly, it's really, they feel a passion. And I think the nature, and I mean this, I think the nature of the opportunities here to help shape kind of an interim original suburb is really challenging and interesting to a lot of people, because it's not like we just annex another 500 acres of land and plop down another 800 houses. A lot of people that work with me, they're not into that. They could go do that in Aurora or somewhere else, but they want to be in a place where they see, as I said, a lot of promise, a lot of challenges. You know, bringing back the light rail, which is way down because of RTD's challenges. What are we doing to build that capacity back up that they want to restore our service? You know, there's people that are interested in that. There are people that are interested in our housing balance issue. Do we want to do more attainable housing across the board? There are people that are interested in that in our staff, and I think that challenges them. That being said, we also have staff members who do things here that you can do elsewhere, like our building staff are out in the field every day inspecting. They can inspect here, they can inspect in Aurora, they can inspect in Denver. And that's where I raised the challenge, because 2 of the 3 are getting reasonably close to retirement age. And what's happening is there's a huge aging out in that profession. There's not been the replenishment in the trades in that whole area. So contractors are having the same issue. So we hire building staff that have traditionally been contractors. That's kind of the progression. What I would not really want to do is hire one of the companies that are out there that have 50 or 60 people on staff, and they provide the inspection services for a whole bunch of cities. I've heard horror stories about the customer service related to that. Our folks are personal. They develop relationships with the people that they're inspecting. I just heard from the chamber president today. I sat down with him for coffee. He said, "Oh, I just had an inspection in my house." You know, that is what we want to try to do, is have that connection. But it's increasingly difficult if the jobs can be replicated elsewhere. And I think that's the challenge in some of the other departments, is there's not really the customization of the challenge here. They have kind of the opportunity to do kind of similar work elsewhere, and it's a lot more, there's a lot of competition right now.
On the previous slide, you had mentioned, you know, just balancing large projects. Is there anything specifically, you didn't call that out on anything the BAC can help with? Because it doesn't sound like it's headcount. Is there any kind of software or anything? I mean, I know how it is, you know, sometimes it's just, you can't add anything to it. It's just hard,
Yeah.
you know?
Maybe I was thinking that more existentially as a department versus your role in terms of helping us with that. I appreciate the question. But in terms, I was thinking in terms of departmental challenges.
Yeah.
And the challenge with that is we've decided deliberately to engage some pretty large projects over the course of the next year or 2 in an environment where the pace of development activity is not slowing down.
Yeah.
I mean, we thought when COVID hit, it would stop. It didn't stop, it accelerated. People were busier in the building community. We didn't expect that at all. So that's the nature of that.
Yeah, nature.
Do you have any major opportunities for ROI from investments? Like, is there any activities that if you have another body to go after could generate a positive return to bring back into the city to further help the department and expand the needs? Is there anything that pops out like that? It's kind of a next stage thing that you'd love to do?
No, I appreciate that question too, and not immediately. I think if our economic development program, if our strategic plan comes back and gives us opportunities into the future, there might be something for another half type person to relieve our economic development manager. But our economic development program is entirely geared toward the small and entrepreneurial businesses here, because that represents 75% of the employee base in Englewood. And so we'd like to keep the focus on that. But if we have the opportunity to grow in new areas based on that strategic plan outcome, that's something I think longer term we could take a look at. But otherwise, in terms of the planning staff and the building staff and our redevelopment programs, I think we're in a place where we have the FTE count that we need.
Gotcha, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Any other questions? Any other questions for Brad here? Chris, jumping back, are you guys having the same, you didn't mention it, are you having the same employment challenges, hiring, retention? Has that been a massive issue for you?
Not yet. I mean, we're a small department. I mean, it certainly concerns me.
Yeah.
You know, knowing what, you know, similar positions with other cities, other organizations pay. So I think, like Brad said, that's the entire leadership team, I think, shares those concerns.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Any other questions?
Well, thank you. Appreciate your
Yeah,
time.
thank you all.
It's always good to visit with you.
It's great to meet you.
Definitely, and thank you so much for what you guys put together for us in this great information. So really appreciate all the work you've been doing.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
I'm off to code next.
We'll see you in 48 minutes.
Okay.
Take care, everybody.
All right, so I know moving on to the next one is we've been having over the last couple of months discussions about the meeting time. Tonight's kind of another example of some of the challenges with our meeting times with Sean's. I think that was more of a one-off thing, but as we've had that discussion, I believe where we left it was getting some feedback from Sean and Tim, who are not with us in the room right now, and Ginny and everyone else. What nights work for you guys from the city? What are your feelings on moving the time and thoughts?
I did send out an email to everyone, and I didn't hear back, so I think we're okay night-wise, so whatever you all just, decide upon, it's really, the ball's back in your court.
I mean, so with that, and we're missing James tonight, so we can obviously table this for another month and really think this to kick off for next year's cycle. After this budget might be the easiest way to do it.
I think that makes sense.
And even just come, okay, we'll pick some dates based off of the calendars that we shared in the past and say, let's vote on this, and the date that gets the most votes wins. Like, we can find a way to decide and table this one so we can move forward with it. So, does that sound like a good plan for everyone?
That's great.
Awesome. So we'll leave that till next month. Upcoming meetings, we've got safety on the 26th and on the 24th of May is transportation. So April 26th, May 24th for the next two meetings. Moving to members' choice. Anything?
Well, I just want to circle back to those last two
Oh, yeah.
meetings. So safety, that's PD only,
And municipal court.
and municipal court, excuse me. And then transportation will involve who?
Public works,
Okay, just public works.
just public works.
Only thing to add for me, next meeting, I may or may not be able to join. I'll be tentatively on the road, so if I have service, I could dial in, but if I don't have service, I can't dial in. So just a heads up.
I'll make sure I send you the link.
Okay.
And I may not have done that this past time. I don't think I sent a link out to everybody. And the only reason why I think that is because I had to send Peter a special link for tonight.
Yeah, I'll share my experience with you when we walk out this evening.
So sorry about that.
No
That's
problem.
my error.
It worked great. Thank you. I'm sorry I couldn't be there. I just didn't want to get anybody else sick. So.
We appreciate
No,
it.
I appreciate that, and hope you feel better too, Peter.
Thanks.
Okay, anything else for members' choice to bring up? We'll have a beautiful rest of the night. That brings this meeting to an end. Our next one is Tuesday, April 22nd. Same place, same time.
Right.
All right, we'll see you all then.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.